Friday on JFM. Energy transition and climate change mitigation in Nigeria takes center stage, explaining the role of ASM in energy transition and climate change mitigation in Nigeria, with their objective to advocate and campaign for a full implementation of the Nigeria Energy Transition Plan and other global policies and treaties. Join Emeka Umesi and our seasoned resource persons on the role of artisanal and small-scale miners in energy transition and climate change mitigation in Nigeria. Fridays 9 to 10 a.m. only on JE 101.9 FM. Powered by Ziva Community Initiative Advocate for a Sustainable Community with support from Africa Center for Energy Policy.
As we move towards a more sustainable world, as we move towards a more greener energy, there's a need for women's involvement in the process. And in doing that, we need a lot more intentionality in not just getting women in the conversation, but also getting them in the rooms and also in the places where decisions are made. Good morning and welcome to Voices from the Mines, brought to you by Ziva Community Initiative. My name is Umesi Daniel Chukwemeka. And like we do every Friday from 9 till 10 a.m., we bring you all of the important conversations around mining, especially when it deals with small and artisanal miners. On the show this morning, we're talking about the role of women in mining. What exactly do we mean by sustainability? Not just in terms of environmental sustainability, but also social sustainability. What roles do women play? Do they have as much voice as they should? Are they getting involved as they should in the mining conversation, not just in the fields, but also in the policy making process? And on the show this morning, like we always do, we've got a seasoned guest for you. One who has, like they say, gone through the trenches, has seen the ups and downs, has been in those rooms where those conversations have been made, and also have an opinion about what should be done better. I've got with me this morning on the show Dr. Raulatu Piwuna. She's an environmental geologist here in the city of Jos. Good morning, ma, and welcome to the show.
Good morning. I'm glad to be here.
It's good to have you, ma'am. Before we get into the meat of the conversation, because of course, like I said before, we're talking about the roles of women in energy transition and mining, but just from a layman's perspective, when we say energy transition, I keep asking this question because a lot of people seem to not have a good grasp of the thoughts. When we say energy transition, what exactly do we mean in the layest of terms for everybody to understand?
Thank you for the question. In the layest of terms, so right now we use a lot of hydrocarbons to generate energy for almost everything we need energy for. And in layers terms, hydrocarbon in sense just petrol.
Okay.
Everybody knows petrol.
Yeah.
Now when you burn petrol, you release a lot of toxic and harmful elements into the atmosphere, which is reducing our ozone layer and allowing the harmful rays of the sun to hit us, which leads to all the other issues, excess heat, erratic rainfall, and all that. So energy transition, that has brought about a need to look at what are alternative ways to still generate energy and yet not cause harm to the environment. So now we're in that season of looking for the alternative sources of energy, yet being completely efficient as the ones we've been used to.
Okay, now that you've explained that, it's a lot more easier to understand. Now, we're talking mining because that's the crux of our show. How does mining feature in this conversation? And also, where is the role of women in all of this conversation about energy transition and mining?
For me, energy, you can't talk energy without mining, because it's from the mining activities, which is basically the extraction of natural resources for the use or the benefits of humans. Yeah. So till you do that extraction, you can't get those alternative sources of energy. Because right now, technology is moving towards and realizing that the alternative sources beyond the biotechnology, where compost and all that, we have lithium, we have cobalt, we have the rare earths which we find in our monazite, which is zircon, niobium, thorium. All these are used in the making of batteries, solar panels, all those things that we need. So without mining, you can't access these things. So mining is central, it is key for getting the materials. And then secondly, a lot of energy is used within the mining sector. So whether it's extracting those things that are needed or not, energy is being consumed. It's a great contributor to the energy consumption globally. So in those two areas, mining is very central to the issue of the transitioning of this energy and has to be considered.
I want to just piggyback a little because you made mention of something I think that has bothered me for a while. Because when we talk about transition, we always, like you mentioned, we're talking about going to cleaner forms of energy, one where less hydrocarbons are released and the environment is safer. But like you also said, in the extraction of these minerals, these things we fear also happen. Is there a balance? Has there been a balance, or are there plans for a balance between extraction, production for energy transition, and what we need? I ask this question because I think there was a research done where they were looking at the production of solar batteries. And they realized that in the production of solar batteries, more energy was released in the production process than what we feared. How can we find a balance? And is there even a balance in that sense?
There is a balance, and we're beginning to look into that. So, like as a sector, that's what I mean. So, the amount of harmful elements that are released into the atmosphere when you use liquefied natural gas is much, much less than when you use petrol.
Okay.
So now the talk is to encourage all our mining industries, whether artisanal or large scale, to begin to use this alternative source of energy to, meet the need. If not, indeed, there won't be a balance. So we have our lithium companies. Kaduna State recently launched a lithium plant. So it's producing what is needed for clean energy, but the company itself needs to use liquefied natural gas so that it does not cancel that which it's aiming to address.
Let's bring it back to women. In all of this conversation, how important is women or women in this conversation? Because I hear people say things like we are going for sustainable energy. But I also understand that in talking about sustainability, it goes beyond environmental sustainability. There's also the issue of social sustainability. Is the women's inclusion in this conversation, is it from a social standpoint solely, or are there other economic benefits to having women in energy transition?
So beyond even the economic and social, there's even the environmental. And so women, a lot of women are involved, have always been involved, but somehow nobody pays attention to them or didn't pay attention to what they were doing and contributing. So right now we have women who are advocating and talking about there are women out there who are doing, in answer to your question now, the actual mining itself. They're involved in it. They are doing advocacies about making sure that the mining is done in an environmentally friendly and sustainable way where the communities can benefit from it. And then also making sure that the mining sector itself is gender friendly to women, where they are more comfortable to work within the sector.
Now, somebody who wants to have a rebuttal would say, when you look at mining, even though I would love to ask, before I go to the question, when we think of mining in this part of the world, we only think about one part of it, the extraction. Are there different phases to this? And what are these phases? Because in my head, if I think of mining, I think of people digging holes and going underground. But I know that there is more to mining than just the extraction. So for the layman out there, me inclusive, what are the phases or different processes of mining that we do not know that we should know, especially when we want to have the conversation around women's involvement in it?
So mining involves so many aspects. The key one, as you said, everybody knows, is that extraction, which can be done in a very proper way, and so we call them the large-scale mining activity, and then the improper way, in quotes, where we have the artisanal miners participating. Now, before you get to that stage, there's a lot of paperwork, field work, geophysical survey, geochemical analysis that you have to do to be able to ascertain that you even have a material there. When you ascertain you have a material there, then you go to extract the material. After the extraction, there's some basic processing that you usually do on site. Move it up to a larger scale, further refining before selling or exporting. Now, in all these stages, women are involved. Women can be there. The desk work, women are involved and can be there, and they are there. The field work, women are there, they can be there. And the last but one speaker, that is Lois.
Yes.
She's a mining geologist. I don't know if I didn't listen to all of her, interview, but she actually goes to field. She just came back from field last week, doing cadastral units for some company, making sure the aeromagnetics is tallying with what is on ground. So women are involved in all those aspects and don't have to necessarily be on the pit.
Yes.
Then also at the processing, in more advanced countries, they control the machines, because now it's machines that do these things.
Yes.
So they're in the control room, controlling the machines just like any other man will do it. And then also in the final stage of refining, and that one, even the artisanal miners, if you go to most of the tin sheds around here now recently, you'll see women are the ones using the jig table. They're sorting out and refining the materials, no more even having to use their pans. And then the final stage that is more, let me use the word classy, is we have what we call our gemstones. Now when that is extracted, women are very much involved in what we call the faceting and the cutting of these gemstones, polishing them for export, for use by the end users. So women
are very much involved in the process. Now that you've highlighted this process, and for me I think it's important that we understand it, because like I said before, the understanding of what people think mining is solely the extraction process. There was a research by McKinsey in 2021 that said that women were leaving the mining sector. And when I went through the paper, which wasn't very extensive, I should also add, the reasons for that, obviously, are the gender biases in the industry. For women who want to break into mining, what are some of the biggest barriers they get to deal with? Because, like you mentioned, they are more than just going on the pit. They do other things. What things stop women from getting involved in mining as they should?
One of the main things, and I don't know when it will end, is that just notion that people have that mining is for men. It doesn't matter, even this faceting that I'm talking to you about, the world thinks it's men that do it. So that is one of the biggest biases that women have. They just think it's a men's thing to do anything mining. Then they have other issues, particularly to us here in Africa. The issue of the right to own a land, the right to collect loans because you don't have collaterals, So women have all those barriers that they're still dealing with.
Right, let's go on a first commercial break on the show. When we come back, we'll be continuing conversation around women's involvement in mining, and also talking about how women can break forth into these industries. What are some of the things we need to do? Are there needs for policy changes to ensure that women, do not get stopped back or do not get hindered on getting into something as productive as mining. Also, talking about why women get into it. A very interesting stat show that it's usually for the money, but beyond that, are there other reasons why women want to get into it? All of this and many more on Voices from the Minds.
Every Friday on JFM, energy transition and climate change mitigation in Nigeria takes center stage, explaining the role of ASM in energy transition and climate change mitigation in Nigeria, with their objective to advocate and campaign for a full implementation of the Nigeria Energy Transition Plan and other global policies and treaties. Join Emeka Umesi and our seasoned resource persons on the role of artisanal and small-scale miners in energy transition and climate change mitigation in Nigeria. Fridays 9 to 10 a.m. only on JE 101.9 FM. Powered by Ziva Community Initiative Advocate for a Sustainable Community with support from Africa Center for Energy Policy.
Salon to Voices from the Minds, brought to you by Ziva Community Initiative with support from the Africa Center for Energy Policy. And today on the show we've been talking about the role of women in mining and energy transition, breaking barriers and driving change. Just a reminder, you can be a part of the conversation at the other side of 9 by 9:30, 9:45. The phone lines will be open so you can call in and ask your questions and make your contributions. If you're a woman who wants to get into mining, I'm sure you must have experienced some form of barriers. Call us and share with us your stories and what you have done or you are doing to overcome those barriers. So let's talk women's leadership in mining. I think there's a conference, I think it's happening in October, where I think it's African Women in Mining, where women's leadership would be a central point of the conversation. But when we talk about women leadership in mining, the stats do not exactly favor women. The numbers do not show that a lot of women are in top leadership positions when it comes to mining. You've talked about the barriers, obviously gender biases, but do you think, again, this is just from my perspective, that there is a knowledge gap that might be a big hindrance for women being those positions? Or do you solely believe that these gender biases are the reason for women are not as influential in those positions as they should?
When you say knowledge gap, what do you mean exactly?
What I mean is
women
are not
women
getting trained.
Study?
No, are not getting trained enough in those specific courses to be involved in the mining process.
I don't think that is an issue. In the sense that it's not an issue in the sense that when the women are in the sector already, they get the training, because they won't say, no, your colleague is going, who is male, and you, the female, will go. That doesn't happen, at least not in this part of the country. If you're going to get a training, everybody who is qualified to get the training goes. The issue, rather, is to get the women to even enter the system.
So the
that
entry position
is the biggest problem for us here, in this country in particular. We have an issue of the women getting into the sector. A very outstanding narrative of this was the very first female mining engineer in the country, Engineer Banker. She graduated first class, but did not get employed till 20 years after. Whoa. In the Ministry of Mines and Steel.
20 years
in those days it was called Mines and Steel, now Ministry of Solid Minerals Development. 20 years after, she made a case, she wrote letters, her senator wrote letters. She fought and fought and fought and fought. 20 years after was when she got her first employment letter into the ministry. But as she got into the ministry, she did her best and she retired 2 years ago. Sadly, 20 years out of that was missing, and so she didn't even retire at the top of the career. So those are the things that have limited the presence of women in the leadership positions where they can, make a positive contribution or
To the
change.
sector. Now,
to
you,
the
you,
sector.
you, you gave a story, and the first thought that came to my head is, like you said, she had 20 years of gatekeepers shutting the door at her. She's been there, and like you and other women have been there. Do these gatekeepers, mainly men obviously, do they still exist? And for women, how easier, for want of a better word, is it for them to get into the industry now?
I'm not too sure it's much easier.
The problems still persist.
The problems are still there. We had a meeting with the Committee on Solid Minerals, Senate Committee on Solid Minerals. They came to Plateau State last month, and so we were invited to have a talk with them. And we mentioned that as one of the issues. We told them that if you ask us to give you 10 CVs of females that are qualified, that their fellow classmates have been employed for the last 10 years within the ministry, we'll give you their CVs. They're still just looking for things to do to survive. They are not practicing that which they learned as against their male classmates who are there, who are almost getting to director levels now. So the thing is still there. But to be fair, we have the private company is helping to close that gap a bit. So they are now employing more of it doesn't matter your gender, they are more open, they employ all. I keep giving this example like a broken record, but it's true. I'll keep saying it till I see a change. If you go to the Ministry of Solid Minerals, the Zonal Mines Office here in Jos, we have the Zonal Mines Office, we have the Mining Cadastral Office, we have the Mines Inspectorate Office, we have the NGSC Office, we have the ASM Office. 5 different units, agencies under the Ministry of Solid Minerals Development. The only female staff you have there are the support staff. So the secretary, the cleaners, you have some females. But all of the professionals there are all male.
How?
Not because we don't have females.
How influential is culture to these buyers? Because like you said, if we have women, because I did a course in geology back in school, and I think some of the smartest people in that class were females. Now it means that women obviously are going to study these courses and they are going to get trained. But like you've also said, the stats show that more men are in positions of power and decision making than women. How important is culture in this conversation? And do you think that in a different culture, this would have changed?
Very, very significant, sadly. Culture is the biggest thing. I also lecture in the University of Jos, and so I'll answer your question by just giving this example. And 4 years ago, a 100 level student came to me when we were going to go for our field work. And she said, "Ma, I don't want to go for field work." And I said, "Why can't you? Why won't you?" And she said, "I told my mother." Her mother is a teacher. "I told my mother we're going for field work, and when I explained all that it will entail, my mother said I should change the course because it's not a woman's course." And I was like, I looked at her, and I realized that talking to her was not the problem. It's the mother. And the mother is just one example of the so many. This one is because it's like the practical one. We have so many who didn't even enter the course at all because a mother, a father out there said, "This is not for females. Why are you even thinking that? So stay back." But luckily, because she will have to fail the whole of 100 level, fail the whole of 200 level before she'll be withdrawn. She didn't want that, and the mother definitely didn't want that. So, to the glory of God, she's in her final year. And of course, I took time to educate her on the other things. Yes, you have to be knowledgeable effective, efficient in your field work, you need to know it. But when you graduate and you begin to work, you don't necessarily have to work where you always have to go to field. Technology has made it so many times. Others will go to field. You can be here in your office and you just do the analysis of whatever they will bring out. You draw up the maps and and do interpretation. So you don't have to go to field all the time. But indeed you will have to have the knowledge such that if there's a need for you at any time to go to field, you'll be ready. But it does not mean you always prepare. And I concluded by telling her, I'm a lecturer here. I don't have to go to field every day. But when I have to, I do go. So you can be a lecturer too. So that's the cultural bias is still very much there. People still think, why women? Why should a woman go there? What is she doing there? Then the woman who eventually ventures to be there, she faces a lot. Sexual harassment, looking down on, not given the best of opportunities to express herself the best way she can and contribute to the sector. And it's all tied to that mentality. Again, back to the example of Engineer Banke, she actually told us that the minister then told her to her face, you are a woman. What do you want in the mining sector? But she came out to the first class.
I was going to ask a question because, like you said, these bias obviously exist and they are such strongholds that less women are in the positions of power. But some men will say, we want to protect, again, this is the conversation I haven't heard before, but I imagine it's been hard. They'll say, we want to protect men's spaces. We see women, for want of a better word, infiltrate men's spaces. And this is supposed to be a man's space where men are just men, and so we do not want women to be there. For people who would have such conversations or such rebuttals, what would you say to them?
I'll tell them they should have a change, they should have a rethink, because it's not a fight, it's not a challenge, it's just contribution for best results. And I will encourage them to think that way.
Now, you're talking about women who are there, but some might also say or ask the question of, do powerful women or those who have gotten some level of positions of authority, do they make enough spaces for younger women to come? Do we have enough initiatives where women in positions of power in the mining sector are creating opportunities for younger women? Or because some would say, hey, I'm there, it took me so long to get here, I don't want anybody else to get here. That, jealousy thing that people often talk about. Do we have such initiatives that women are doing to ensure that younger women also get a smoother path to the top that they did not have?
So I'm glad to tell you that, yes, indeed, in that aspect, we are having more and more women who, when they have the platform, they encourage women. I start with the Ziva Community Initiative, which is run by and owned by Madam Emily Ofodin. The other day I told her, I said, do you know all your staff are females? So it's like that's that's what we're beginning to see. We have then the Women in Mining Association.
Yes.
We have every last Thursday of the month, we have what we call the WIMT class, the Women in Mining Training Institute, where lectures are delivered to educate, to empower, to make women more comfortable within the sector. So we have those things happening. We have more of those who are at the top. Always when they're on the board for those employments, they make such considerations. We're beginning to see that change.
And before we go on a commercial break, there was a question I was willing to actually when you were speaking about your conversation, with the powers that be in government. And the question is, should we have a affirmative action for women in mining? Should we say, you know what, because we don't have enough women here, let's have 30% or 40% or 50% of positions in power positions, in certain positions for women? Do you think affirmative action for women in mining would go a long way in changing the narrative of what we currently have?
It definitely, yes. It would. It definitely would.
Let's go on a commercial break. When we'll come back, we'll take this conversation further and also open the phone line so you can call in and ask your questions and make your contributions. This is still Voices from the Mines, brought to you by Ziva Community Initiative. Goodbye.
Friday on JFM. Energy transition and climate change mitigation in Nigeria takes center stage, explaining the role of ASM in energy transition and climate change mitigation in Nigeria, with their objective to advocate and campaign for a full implementation of the Nigeria Energy Transition Plan and other global policies and treaties. Join Emeka Umesi and our seasoned resource persons on the role of artisanal and small-scale miners in energy transition and climate change mitigation in Nigeria. Fridays 9 to 10 a.m. only on JE 101.9 FM. Powered by Ziva Community Initiative Advocate for a Sustainable Community with support from Africa Center for Energy Policy.
You're still on to Voices from the Mines, brought to you by Ziva Community Initiative. And today on the show, we've been talking about the roles of women in mining and energy transition. And it's been an interesting conversation for the last 30 minutes, what the roles women play, the barriers they get to deal with, and how those barriers can be overcome. Remember, you can be part of the conversation by calling us rather on the studio lines on 090 55666699 or 081 218 77777. Again, 090 55666699 or 081 218 77777. Well, Doc has said that we need to have affirmative action when it comes to women's involvement in mining. So let's shift gears. What is the role, or rather, how is gender diversity, specifically in leadership positions, contributed to more sustainable and innovative practices in mining and energy?
Okay, so we have an example of the former DG of the Federal Institute of Research, in Nigeria here, Professor Gloria Elemo. During her tenure as the DG, she pushed for and made sure that any technological advancement, as much as possible, should look at the raw materials we have within the country as the solution to getting that innovation started. And during her time there also, she encouraged the different aspects of the mining where women can be entrepreneurs in it. She encouraged that women should be a part of that. So that's one example. At a very low scale, but they say a drop in the, one step at a time.
Yes.
We take the whole journey one day. There's some women here, in particular Jummai Daniel. She uses her water pump for her artisanal mining activities, and so ordinarily she uses petrol. But when she got the education and training that burning liquefied natural gas was better for the environment, she changed her source of energy. She changed the tank and she now uses gas to power her pump. And I'm sure she's not alone. There's so many who are beginning to do those small activities to help us have a better and cleaner environment.
Just to piggyback on the part of women's involvement and policies, do you think, and what suggestions should you make for us as a people, as a country, that we need to have a policy change when it comes to mining? Not just in terms of for us to have cleaner systems, but also women's involvement. And if you were to suggest possible changes to these policies, what would they be?
Okay, so yes, I would advocate for the policy change. And as you know, I don't remember the exact date now, but the general civil service rule, somewhere in there was a rule that said women were not allowed to go underground. I'm glad to tell you that has changed due to the review in the Mining Act, You know, now it's not gender specific. It's allowing for anybody to enter underground to do what they need to do. So that is a positive change that we're happy about. And then another one is the issue of, not, you call it affirmative action, but I just feel it is just the enactment of the UN Women Agreement, which says that 35% of the women, any office position should be occupied by female gender. So it's just the enactment of this agreement within the sector that we're asking for. It will really be a good thing to be done. And then also, when you look at all the regulations of the mining sector, none are specific to carry the female gender. So issues like maternity leave for women, childcare center within the facility, these are things that should be in the regulation. If not, mining companies will not do it. So when you have those kind of things included in the regulation, then mining companies will have to comply and put in those facilities. So they don't have an excuse for not employing women or engaging women in this sector. Because if the women have facilities, toilet facilities that are gender friendly to them, it will make them more comfortable and want to belong to the space. If they have a childcare center within the sector, they will be able to work comfortably and be more productive.
Let's stick with leadership, women's leadership in mining. As a country, you've obviously given a lot of examples on some women whose careers were stunted because of these barriers, but you've also said that we've had some progress. If you were to rate us as a people, how much progress have we made from where we were before to where we are now in terms of women's involvement in mining and transition? And how much progress do we think we can and should make, given also that we're looking at 2060 to meet net zero emission? How much progress have we made? How much progress can we make? And the steps we are currently taking in terms of women's involvement in this long journey, do you think these steps are enough to get us where we need to get to?
I think there's a lot of effort by government and NGOs for awareness, and advocacy on, the energy transitioning and how women can contribute to it. But in terms of the progress, for me, I think it's still very, very slow and very low, particularly on the involvement of the women. The men are still thinking it's a men's thing.
Yes.
And that studies has shown that to get jobs, several studies, not even within the mining sector, where it has shown that in a leadership position when the gender is balanced, there is always 10%, 15% more productivity and extra income to that company than when it's otherwise. So we pray that the men will wake up to realize that. In this example, we have the mining cadastral office. The current DG is Engineer Nkom. He is very conscious of the role women can contribute, and he's one person who has been encouraging and pushing women forward to bring out their A game within the sector, and I can say he hasn't been disappointed.
All right, let me segue this conversation not on the core, for want of a better word, of mining, but on the other aspect of mining that we often do not talk about, which is the education part. You give an example of a student in your class whose mother refused her, or initially refused her to go for field work because she thought you were a girl. What do girls need to do in mining? As a country, our educational system has come under a lot of attacks, either from poor funding or from the recent one that happened with JAM, just blows up the kind of worms that we already know existed in the system. But for women in education, how much do we have them? and how much influence do you think they are having and can have in changing the narratives? Because, like you mentioned, while that girl's mother was a hindrance to her going forward, there are also other girls who have heard all their lives that this is a man's job, so you dare not. The same way, for example, some years back, tech was a men's job. Everything tech was men, until certain women started to teach it, became more vocal, and became more intentional about creating spaces for them. In the educational sector, why I think women should have more influence, because of it doesn't need physical activity in that sense. How much women are there, and how much do you think the system as it is right now is giving women spaces and opportunities to get into the system?
I think for sure, within the educational system, we're having full, encouragement, support for the females to be there. There's no restriction, not to my knowledge. But recently I listened to a presentation from somebody in Sokoto University, and actually, sadly, he was decrying the situation in Sokoto University, where he said the female lecturers there were only 2.
Wow.
And that was really a problem for the fewer female students that were students within the department. He gave an example of him wanting to take his students to field, and the girl was just so uncomfortable. He asked her, but she didn't feel free. Eventually, she went to the secretary of the department and told her that the date that the supervisor was...
Need money to do the groundwork. People would love to do it, but they need to be paid. There's money that needs to be done in terms of moving around, in terms of even paying for education where necessary. Do women have those kind of fundings, right? Or is not a necessary part of the ecosystem? And if there isn't, what do you think can and should be done to ensure that fundings like this exist for women?
So, from the educational aspect, there's no bias. Where there are opportunities for scholarship, for loans, it's not gender biased. Everybody can apply for it, everybody gets it once you have the academic qualification to benefit from it. In terms of being out there in the sector and actually practicing, we have limitations there. Recently, a member of ours, Hajia Amina Benjamin, she approached the Bank of Industry for a loan to just further expand her business. She wanted to increase the capacity of what she's already doing, and she asked for a loan of, is it 20 million now? And she was told she will have to bring collateral of things worth 5 million. And she's like, if I have something like that, why would I go looking for a loan? So women, we will need the government to look into how these loans are more gender friendly. It happens in other countries.
When you say gender friendly, what do you mean? I asked because, sorry to cut you short, when you talked about how they needed collateral, I'm asking, isn't that standard practice when it comes to getting loans? So when you say gender friendly, what exactly do you mean?
So back to one of the questions you earlier asked, the issue of culture.
Yeah.
So women generally don't have as much grounded material as their own.
True.
Because it's men that usually inherit land,
True.
property. So to ask a woman to give that as a collateral, you've told her, go back to a man, look for him to give you the collateral.
True.
So if they give conditions that are more favorable to women such that they can access these loans, that would be great.
All right, let's go on and last commercial break for the show. And when we come back, the phone lines will be fully open so you can call in and ask your questions and make your contributions. We are still talking about the role of women in mining and energy transition, the barriers and the things they need to do to break past those barriers. Yes, still lots of voices from the mines. Go nowhere.
Every Friday on JFM, Energy transition and climate change mitigation in Nigeria takes center stage, explaining the role of ASM in energy transition and climate change mitigation in Nigeria, with their objective to advocate and campaign for a full implementation of the Nigeria Energy Transition Plan and other global policies and treaties. Join Emeka Umesi and our seasoned resource persons on the role of artisanal and small-scale miners in energy transition and climate change mitigation in Nigeria. Fridays 9 to 10 a.m. only on JE 101.9 FM. Powered by Ziva Community Initiative Advocate for a Sustainable Community with support from Africa Center for Energy Policy.
You're still on to Voices from the Mind, and brought to you by Ziva Community Initiative. And today on the show, we've been talking about the role of women in mining and energy transition, breaking barriers, and driving change. We've got with us this morning, who has been obviously giving us a thorough breakdown of what it means, the issues that women deal with, and how women can go past it. Because, like we said here already on the show, these barriers are strongholds, like they say in spiritual terms. They are spiritual forces against women, and hopefully together as a people and as a country we can go past them. Dr. Piwuna has been here today, and she has been sharing with us experiences and knowledge on the issues. The phone lines are opened 090-5566-6699 or 081-218-77777. Do call in and share your thoughts with us and ask your questions. And like I said before, if you're a woman who have been involved in mining before, who wants to get involved in mining, you've got questions or you have experiences you want to share with us, please do call us and share your experiences with us. We want to hear them. And hopefully you want through your experience and your knowledge, to be a force for good and motivation for other women. Well, 5 minutes left at the end of the show, so I have like 2 quick questions for you. The first one is, if you were to speak to women out there, those listening right now and who would listen later, whether on air or on YouTube, what would you say to them? For women who want to get involved in mining, what would be your words of motivation to them?
I say you're welcomed, and we want you to come and join us. That there are so many sectors within, aspects within the sector where you can contribute meaningfully and you belong. And let me just point out that you don't even have to study geology or mining to be within the sector. That's a beautiful thing about the sector.
Really, so what if I don't study geology or mining? How then can I be involved?
Good. So, like the aspects of the faceting, cutting, and polishing that I talked about, you don't have to study geology. If you study geology, it's an added plus for you, because you will know the direction of light, you will know the crystal form, and those things. But there are courses that you go through before you can even start that. And once you have the interest, when you go through these courses, gemology, introduction to minerals, and so on, you'll be able to. We have, in fact, most of the people who do the cutting and faceting have never entered the 4 walls of classroom. Wow. Talk more of geology in particular. So you're all welcomed. You can bring in your part. We have lawyers for the issue of advocacy, issue of policy change, experts in it, to come and just contribute to give voice for the women within the sector.
My final question for you, because you're pretty much out of time already. For the women who are already there, who are dealing with these things, many of them, obviously, like you've given 2 stories, are having to deal with biases that stops them. What would be a word to them? And generally, with mining, women's involvement, what's the picture you have in the next, say, 10 years for women in mining?
I think, so for women, just always bring your A game. Again, I conclude with an example again of what used to happen in my department. For almost 15 years, there were only 3 women in that department. And we had about 12 men, so 15 in all. And the one out of the 3 women, one was at the top, the 2 were at the bottom. But now the story is different. And the story is different beyond the numbers. Everyone is bringing in their A game. So you can't say we can't work with this person. So if you find yourself within the sector, I encourage you to just bring your A game. Don't allow the, in quotes, shaming that anyone wants to do. Don't allow the talk down. Don't allow the, sidelining that anyone wants to do. Just make sure you give your A job, and I'm sure it will speak for you eventually. I must say that this is even not just unique to only the women in the mining sector. Women in so many sectors where men feel they're the ones that belong there. That is the thing that happens. And so when you see a woman at the top, you know that it was because she brought her A game in. She didn't take anything for granted, and she refused to be intimidated. I must say, for most of those women, they have a good support system to keep encouraging them. So I think it's important to let the public know that if you have any female who is interested in this sector, please give her the support she needs, the encouragement she needs.
All right, let me see if I can pick one call and just 30 seconds. Hello, good morning. Hello, good morning. Good morning, sir. 30 seconds quickly.
Yeah, Mazuka for is my name. There is Mazuka from Open Business Center here in Angutos. I think there is need for the people who are money to do as much as have what we call inside themselves with cooperative society. Cooperative societies will help them. They then form for them to get what we call good materials, good equipment in mining, not the picture of doing this good method that is not healthy to their head. Good morning, Maz.
Thank you so much for calling, Mazi. Thank you, ma'am, for coming through this morning. This is the size of the package this week, but do not worry. We'll be here again next week, Friday, from 9 to 10 a.m. to give you informative and educative conversations around artisanal and small-scale miners and the role they play in Nigeria's energy transition. This has been Voices of the Mines, brought to you by Ziva Community Initiative. From me, may every one of us here stay out of trouble, spread love, and seek the truth. Coming up by 10 a.m. is the news at 10. Adios.